The air in the training hangar at Fort Courage was a physical entity, a thick, greasy blanket woven from the smells of diesel fumes, hot metal, and the faint, acrid tang of yesterday's sweat. It was an atmosphere designed to be oppressive, to grind down the soft edges of civilian life and temper what remained into something useful. Fluorescent lights hummed a monotonous, buzzing drone from the cathedral-high ceiling, their cold, white glare stripping all color from the rows of metal equipment and the weary faces of the trainees. The concrete floor, stained with the ghosts of oil spills and boot polish, was a vast gray canvas upon which small dramas of exhaustion and effort were painted daily. Every clang of a dropped wrench, every shouted order, every rhythmic grunt of exertion echoed in that cavernous space, a symphony of institutional suffering that was the background music of military education. It was a place where confidence was manufactured through abrasion and authority was measured in decibels. In the midst of this carefully orchestrated chaos, she was an anomaly. She stood in the second rank of the formation, a place for those who wished neither to lead nor to be seen. Her name, according to the roster, was Specialist Vance, Ilara Vance. Nothing about her demanded attention. She was of average height, with a build that suggested not the sculpted power of a warrior, but the quiet endurance of a long-distance runner. Her uniform, a standard-issue operational camouflage pattern, seemed a size too large, softening what few angles she possessed. Her face was plain, unremarkable, framed by brown hair pulled back into a severe regulation bun that was ruthlessly efficient and devoid of any vanity. She held no particular expression. Her features settled into a mask of neutral observation. While others fidgeted, shifting their weight from foot to foot, their eyes darting towards the instructors or the clock on the wall, she was a study in absolute stillness. She did not seem bored or nervous or tired. She simply was. A rock in the stream of anxious energy that flowed around her. The other trainees, a mix of ambitious young soldiers and career non-commissioned officers seeking a new qualification, had already categorized her. She was a desk jockey, an analyst, some paper pusher from a quiet corner of the intelligence world who had been forced into this advanced combat logistics course by a bureaucratic mandate. They saw her quietness as timidity, her stillness as a lack of engagement. They saw what they expected to see, and so they did not see her at all. Sergeant First Class Marcus Deckard, on the other hand, saw everything, or so he believed. He was the lead instructor for this cycle, and the hangar was his kingdom. Deckard was a man carved from the very archetype of the drill sergeant. His jaw was a granite block, his neck was thicker than his head, and his voice was a gravelly roar that had been honed over 2 decades of breaking down recruits and building them back up in his own image. He moved with a swaggering, predatory grace, his chest puffed out like a bantam rooster's, his polished boots striking the concrete with the percussive authority of a judge's gavel. To him, the world was a simple binary. There were predators and there were prey, hammers and nails, the strong and the weak. His role, as he saw it, was to identify the weak and either hammer them into strength or discard them. He had built his entire identity, his entire sense of self-worth, on this brutal philosophy. Authority, for Deckard, did not emanate from a place of quiet competence. It was a performance, a projection of dominance that radiated from him like heat from a furnace. His eyes, small and perpetually narrowed, scanned the formation of trainees, and they snagged on the anomaly, on Specialist Vance. He saw her stillness not as discipline, but as a void. He saw her plainness as weakness. In the noisy, aggressive, performatively, masculine world he inhabited. Her quiet femininity was a glaring error, a miscalculation by the system that had allowed a lamb to wander into his den of wolves. He had seen her type before, or so his prejudice told him. The quiet ones who thought they could skate by unnoticed, who would do the bare minimum and then retreat back to their safe, climate-controlled offices. They were a blight on his course, an insult to the warrior ethos he championed. And he had decided, with the unshakable certainty of a man who has never had his core beliefs challenged, that Specialist Vance would be his project for the day. He would make an example of her. He would crack that quiet shell and expose the soft, useless core he was so certain lay within. It was not just his job, it was his pleasure. The day's lesson was on tactical recovery of a disabled vehicle under simulated fire. It was a brutal, physically demanding evolution that required teamwork, strength, and the precise execution of complex procedures under extreme stress. The centerpiece of the exercise was a high-mobility, multi-purpose wheeled vehicle, a hulking beast of steel and wiring that weighed over 2.5 tons. The scenario was simple. The vehicle was down, stranded in the kill zone, and the 10-person squad had to rig a complex system of heavy-duty tow straps, chains, and block-and-tackle pulleys to drag it 50 yards to a designated safe area. All while simulated explosions and machine gun fire, broadcast through a dozen speakers positioned around the hangar, created a disorienting cacophony. It was a test of muscle and nerve. "All right, you slugs," Deckard's voice ripped through the air, silencing the low chatter of the trainees. "Welcome to the pain locker. This hunk of junk in front of you is your ticket home, but right now, it's a 2-ton tombstone in the middle of bad guy land. Your job is to get it, and yourselves, out of the fire. You will work as a team. You will communicate. You will execute. Is that understood?" A ragged chorus of "Yes, Sergeant," answered him. "I can't hear you," he roared, a classic tool of his trade. "Yes, Sergeant." The reply was sharper, louder. Deckard paced before them, his eyes locking onto his chosen target. The key to this evolution is the knot work, specifically the double figure 8 bend and the alpine butterfly loop. These knots will secure your anchor points and your main line. If they fail, the line snaps. If the line snaps under this much tension, he gestured to the vehicle, it will cut a man in half. Cleanly. Am I making myself clear? He let the grim image hang in the air for a moment. Specialist Vance. Ilara Vance's head came up, but her body remained perfectly still. Her eyes met his. They were a calm, steady shade of gray, and for a fleeting, uncomfortable moment, Deckard felt like he was being assessed, not the other way around. He dismissed the feeling as ridiculous. "Front and center, Specialist." She moved, with an economy of motion that was almost unnerving. No wasted steps, no hesitation. She took her place before him, standing at a relaxed parade rest. The cavernous hangar seemed to shrink, the focus of everyone present narrowing to the 2 figures in the center of the concrete floor. The hulking, aggressive sergeant and the quiet, unassuming specialist. "Specialist," Deckard began, his voice dripping with condescending paternalism. "I've been watching you. You're a quiet one. I'm guessing you're more at home behind a computer screen than getting your hands dirty. Am I right?" He didn't wait for an answer. He tossed a thick, coiled length of 1-inch nylon rope at her feet. It landed with a heavy thud. "Show us the alpine butterfly loop. Since this is probably all new to you, I'll walk you through it. First, you make a little loop in the rope, like you're making a bunny ear for a child's story." He was baiting her, using diminutive, insulting language to demean her in front of her peers. The other trainees shuffled their feet, some smirking, others looking away, embarrassed by the naked display of bullying. It was a familiar ritual. The instructor finds a nail that sticks out and hammers it down. Vance did not respond to his words. She simply bent down, picked up the rope, and held it in her hands. She did not look at him. She did not look at the crowd. Her focus was entirely on the length of nylon. There was a beat of silence, broken only by the hum of the overhead lights. Deckard's smirk widened. He saw her hesitation as confirmation of her incompetence. "Go on, specialist," he goaded. "The bunny goes around the tree. Don't be shy." Then she moved. It was not the clumsy fumbling of a novice. Her hands, which had appeared unremarkable moments before, became instruments of impossible speed and precision. The rope flowed through her fingers like water. It was a blur of motion, a dance of practiced dexterity that was too fast for the untrained eye to follow. A loop formed, twisted, passed through itself, and was cinched tight in a single, fluid gesture that took less than 2 seconds. She held up the result. It was a perfect alpine butterfly loop, dressed and set with a geometric flawlessness that was more machine-made than human. A wave of murmurs rippled through the onlookers. Deckard's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of surprise, then annoyance. She had not followed his condescending instructions. She had simply performed the task with a level of mastery that made his lesson plan irrelevant. He felt a sting of public embarrassment. "A fluke," he growled, snatching the rope from her. He undid the knot with a series of angry jerks. "Do it again, slower this time, so the rest of us can follow your process." The sarcasm was thick. Vance took the rope back. Her expression remained unchanged. Her hands moved again, this time with deliberate, almost insulting slowness. She formed the loops, made the turns, and passed the bite. Through, her movements economical and clear, a perfect demonstration for a class of beginners. She held up the second perfect knot. Silence. Deckard's face was now a mask of thunderous fury. He had intended to humiliate her, but she had, without saying a word, turned the tables. She had shown him up. His authority, which relied on the perception of his superior knowledge, had been subtly but undeniably undermined. He felt his control of the situation slipping, and it enraged him. He stepped forward, invading her personal space, his large frame looming over her. The smell of stale coffee and rage radiated from him. "You think you're clever, specialist?" he hissed, his voice low and menacing. "You think you can come into my house and play games? You're not special. You're just a number here, a body to fill a seat. And I am the one who decides whether that body passes or fails." He jabbed a thick finger into her shoulder, a clear physical assault. "You need to learn some respect." She did not flinch. She did not recoil from his touch or his proximity. Her gaze did not waver from his face. She simply absorbed the impact, a rock absorbing a wave. The only thing that changed was the quality of her stillness. It was no longer passive. It became active, coiled, a silence that was heavier and more potent than his loudest shout. It was the calm of a lioness allowing a jackal to dance at the edge of its kill radius. She offered only 4 words, spoken in a voice that was quiet, calm, and utterly devoid of emotion. "Remove your hand, Sergeant." The simple, declarative statement, delivered without fear or anger, was more shocking than any shout would have been. It was not a request. It was an instruction. For a moment, Deckard was so taken aback that he almost obeyed. Then his pride reasserted itself. Who did she think she was? He pressed his finger harder into her shoulder. Or what, specialist? What are you going to do? Before she could answer, the world ended. Deafening screech of tortured metal tore through the hangar, a sound that vibrated deep in the bones of everyone present. It was followed by a cataclysmic boom that was not heard so much as felt, a concussive wave of pressure that slammed into them, staggering the entire formation. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered wildly, then died, plunging the cavernous space into a terrifying semi-darkness, illuminated only by the emergency strobes that began to flash with a frantic, rhythmic pulse. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling. A section of the massive corrugated roof, weakened by years of neglect and a hidden structural flaw, had given way. A 10-ton air conditioning unit, along with a lattice of steel support beams and catwalks, had plummeted 50 feet, crashing directly onto the training area just yards from the disabled vehicle. The initial shock was immediately replaced by a wave of pure, primal panic. Men who were trained for combat were reduced to their most basics, instincts. Some screamed, some dropped to the floor, covering their heads. Others simply froze, their minds unable to process the scale of the disaster that had just unfolded. The simulated sounds of battle were replaced by the very real sounds of destruction and human terror. The groaning of stressed metal, the hiss of a ruptured pipe, and the first terrified cries of the injured. 2 trainees who had been standing near the impact zone were down, one partially trapped under a twisted steel beam, the other lying unnaturally still. Sergeant Deckard was thrown off balance by the blast. He stumbled back from Vance, his face a canvas of disbelief and fear. His authority, so absolute a moment before, evaporated in the face of genuine crisis. He was a man trained to follow procedures, to operate within a known framework. This was chaos. This was real. His mind raced, but it was a frantic, useless spinning of wheels. He started shouting, but his orders were disjointed, panicked fragments of protocol that were useless in this unprecedented situation. Everybody down! Stay down! Medics! Somebody get a medic! Sound off! Report! Report! His voice was just another noise in the cacophony, a contribution to the panic rather than a solution to it. He was a performer whose stage had just collapsed, leaving him exposed and utterly lost. The trainees, looking to him for guidance, saw only a reflection of their own fear, and the chaos deepened. And then, through the pulsing strobes and the swirling dust, a new sound emerged. It was a voice, not loud, but clear, cutting through the panic with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. "You two, with me now? Get that hydraulic jack from the recovery kit. You, check the main breaker for the hangar. Kill all power. Sparks are our enemy right now. You," the voice pointed to another soldier, "find the primary water main shutoff by the west wall. That hissing could be a gas line. We treat it as such until we know otherwise." It was the voice of Specialist Vance. In the instant the crisis had struck, she had transformed. The quiet, unassuming observer was gone. In her place stood a figure of absolute, unshakable command. She moved with a fluid, predatory grace, her body a tool of pure function. Her eyes, no longer passive, scanned the wreckage with a rapid, analytical intensity, assessing threats, identifying resources, and formulating a plan with a speed that seemed superhuman. The fear and confusion that had paralyzed everyone else did not seem to touch her. She moved through the chaos as if it were her natural element. The trainees, desperate for direction, latched onto her calm authority. Her orders were complex, technical, and delivered with a certainty that left no room for doubt. They were the words of someone who had seen worse, who had operated in situations far more dire than this. Without conscious thought, soldiers who vastly outranked her in the conventional hierarchy began to obey. They scrambled to follow her instructions, her voice the only point of stability in a world that had come undone. She was already at the side of the trapped soldier. "What's your name?" she asked, her voice low and steady as she began her assessment. "Peters," the man groaned, his leg pinned beneath a heavy I-beam. "All right, Peters, stay with me. We're going to get you out." Her hands moved with practiced efficiency over his body, checking for bleeding, for other injuries. "Airway is clear. No major arterial bleed visible. Respiration is shallow. Possible crush syndrome. We need to be careful when we lift this." She looked up. "I need 3 more men on this beam. We are not lifting it completely. We are going to lift it just enough to relieve the pressure and slide him out. On my command. I need a tourniquet and an IV kit from the medical bags. Now." Sergeant Deckard stood frozen, watching the scene unfold. It was as if he were watching a play in a foreign language that he somehow understood perfectly. The woman he had been mocking, the meek little paper pusher, was now commanding his hangar, his soldiers, with an effortless authority he had never possessed in his life. Her every action was precise, her every command logical and immediate. She was not just managing the crisis, she was dominating it. She directed the establishment of a triage point, the safe evacuation of the uninjured, and the systematic stabilization of the 2 casualties with the cool, detached competence of a seasoned trauma surgeon operating in a war zone. The awe on the faces of the other trainees was mirrored on his own. They were witnessing a masterclass in crisis management. They saw her improvise a splint from a broken piece of conduit, direct the use of a fire extinguisher to suppress a small electrical fire, and calmly talk the conscious casualty through his pain, keeping him from going into shock. She was a whirlwind of focused, effective action. It was in that moment of stunned observation that Deckard finally understood. His initial judgment of her had not just been wrong. It had been catastrophically, fundamentally wrong. He had looked at a queen and seen a pawn. He had mistaken the deep, quiet water of a master for the shallow puddle of a novice. The realization was a cold, sickening weight in his stomach. His entire worldview, his binary system of predators and prey, was crumbling around him. He had been the jackal, dancing and yapping at the lioness, utterly oblivious to the power he was provoking. The hangar doors at the far end of the building suddenly roared open, flooding the space with the harsh, welcome light of the afternoon sun. Silhouetted against the brightness were the figures of the base's first responders, firefighters, medics, and a group of senior NCOs. Leading them, walking with a purposeful stride that radiated a lifetime of authority, was a man whose presence immediately commanded respect. He was tall and lean, his uniform immaculate, his face a roadmap of hard-won experience. On his collar were the 3 silver chevrons and rocker of a Master Chief Petty Officer. This was Master Chief Thorne, the senior enlisted leader for the entire Special Warfare Training Command, a living legend whispered about in barracks and training halls. Thorne took in the scene with a single, sweeping glance. The wreckage, the organized triage area, the stunned but orderly trainees. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, searched for the person in charge. They passed over the panicked, useless figure of Sergeant Deckard and settled on the woman who was kneeling beside the second casualty, calmly applying a pressure dressing. Thorne's stride faltered for a half step. A look of profound, unmistakable recognition dawned on his face. The hard lines of his expression softened into something that looked almost like reverence. He stopped 10 feet away from her. The medics and firefighters behind him paused, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. The entire hangar fell silent, save for the groans of the injured man. Everyone's attention was now fixed on the legendary Master Chief and the unknown specialist. Thorn drew himself up to his full height. His back went ramrod straight, in a voice that boomed with the authority of decades of command. A voice that made Deckard's earlier shouts sound like the yapping of a puppy. He bellowed a single command that echoed off the steel walls. "Attention on deck!" It was an order reserved for the highest echelons of command, a mark of supreme respect. The trainees, conditioned by years of instinct, snapped to the position of attention. Sergeant Deckard, his mind reeling, did the same. They did not understand why the order had been given. They only knew to obey the Master Chief. Vance did not look up immediately. She finished securing the dressing, gave a quiet instruction to the soldier assisting her, and only then did she rise to her feet. She turned to face the Master Chief. She simply stood there, her hands stained with dirt and a small amount of blood, her expression as calm as ever. Master Chief Thorn did not offer a handshake. He did not ask for a report. He executed the sharpest, most profound salute of his long and storied career. It was a gesture of deep, unwavering respect, from one warrior to another, from a legend to a myth. "Ma'am," he said, his voice now quiet but carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "I did not know you were on this installation. My apologies. The situation is yours until you formally pass command to me." The word hung in the air, an impossibility. "Ma'am." A Master Chief does not call a specialist ma'am. A Master Chief does not salute a specialist. The entire social and military hierarchy upon which these soldiers had built their lives was being inverted before their very eyes. The confusion on the faces of the trainees was absolute. Deckard felt as though the concrete floor had fallen out from under him. "Ma'am?" He looked from the Master Chief to Vance, his mind refusing to connect the dots. It was impossible. It made no sense. Then Thorn spoke again, providing the final, devastating piece of the puzzle. He kept his salute held, his eyes locked on hers. "Commander Vance, call sign Nix. It is an honor, ma'am." The name, the rank, and the call sign descended on the hangar like a bomb. Commander Ilara Vance. Nix. The name echoed in the minds of those who had heard the stories, the whispers that circulated in the special operations community. Nix was a ghost, a legend. The commander of a Tier 1 special missions unit so classified that its very existence was officially denied. A veteran of 100 operations in the darkest corners of the world. A strategic genius and a fearsome operator who had earned more medals for valor than most people had years in service, all of them hidden away in a classified file. She was not just a SEAL. She was the one the SEALs told stories about. The narrator of this modern military fable now stepped forward to fill the void of their understanding, listing the litany of her accomplishments in a reverent tone that echoed in the silent hangar. She was the architect of Operation Serpent's Tooth, the planner behind the rescue at Al-Hadar, the first woman to not only pass, but to dominate the most grueling selection process ever devised by the American military. She was here, in this basic logistics course, under the temporary rank of specialist, as part of a deep cover assessment of training pipeline vulnerabilities. She was a goddess of war wearing the guise of a mortal, and Sergeant First Class Marcus Deckard had jabbed his finger in her chest and told her to learn some respect. The blood drained from Deckard's face. The full, horrifying weight of his actions crashed down upon him. It was a humiliation so profound, so complete, that it transcended mere embarrassment and became a kind of spiritual annihilation. He had not just been wrong. He had been a fool, a blustering, arrogant fool playing God in his little sandbox, completely unaware that a true deity was standing quietly in his formation. He felt the eyes of every trainee on him, their earlier smirks now replaced by looks of pity and disbelief. The crisis was handled with swift efficiency. Command was passed, the injured were evacuated, and the hangar was secured. Through it all, Commander Vance moved with the same quiet competence. When the immediate chaos had subsided, she found Deckard. He was standing alone near the wreckage, a man hollowed out, his entire sense of self utterly dismantled. She approached him not with anger or triumph, but with the detached air of a scientist observing a specimen. "Sergeant," she said, her voice even. Deckard flinched as if struck. He turned to face her, his eyes on the floor. He could not meet her gaze. He snapped to attention, his body rigid with terror. "Ma'am," he choked out. I have no excuse, ma'am. I am prepared to accept full responsibility for my actions. I will accept any punishment." Vance looked at him for a long moment. "Punishment is not the point, Sergeant. The Uniform Code of Military Justice is a tool for enforcing discipline. It is not a tool for teaching wisdom. What happened here today was not a disciplinary failure. It was a tactical failure, a catastrophic intelligence failure." Her words were precise, cutting, and utterly clinical. She was dissecting him, deconstructing his failure in the same way she had deconstructed the crisis. "You made an assumption based on incomplete and biased data," she continued. "You saw my gender, my temporary rank, and my quiet demeanor, and you created a profile. A weak, incompetent, non-threatening target. You then acted on that flawed intelligence. You initiated a confrontation to assert dominance and, in doing so, you completely misjudged the operational environment. Your primary error was not disrespect, Sergeant. Your primary error was a failure to observe and orient. You let your ego write a check that your knowledge could not cash. In a real combat situation, an error of that magnitude does not result in embarrassment. It results in death. Your death and the death of your soldiers." Every word was a nail in the coffin of his pride. She was not punishing him as a superior officer. She was teaching him as a master instructor. She was showing him the gaping, fatal flaw in his entire philosophy. "So no," she said, "you will not be facing a court-martial. That would be an inefficient use of resources. Your re-education will be more personalized. You are being reassigned. Effective immediately, you will serve as my executive assistant for the remainder of my assessment tour. You will carry my gear. You will manage my schedule. You will stand quietly in the corner of every meeting I attend. You will watch, you will listen, and you will learn. You will learn the difference between the appearance of strength and the reality of it. You will learn that competence is quiet, and that the most dangerous person in the room is often the one you see last. Is that understood?" It was a fate far worse than any brig time. He would not be punished and forgotten. He would be forced into a position of intimate daily proximity to the source of his humiliation. He would be a living, breathing testament to her authority, his presence a constant reminder of his colossal failure. He would be forced to witness firsthand the competence he had mocked. "Yes, ma'am," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Crystal clear, ma'am." and so the legend was born. The story of the day a drill sergeant tried to hammer down a nail and discovered it was the tip of a spear held by the hand of a warrior queen. The tale spread through Fort Courage like wildfire, then across the services, passed from one soldier to another in hushed, reverent tones. It became a modern military fable, a teaching tool used in leadership courses and NCO academies. The details would shift with each telling: the size of the collapsed roof, the number of casualties, the exact words spoken by the Master Chief. But the core truth of the story remained immutable. It became a powerful reminder that true strength doesn't need to advertise. Years passed. Sergeant First Class Deckard was never the same. The loud, arrogant rooster was gone, replaced by a quiet, thoughtful man. The crucible of his humiliation had burned away his hubris, leaving behind a core of hard-won humility. After his tour with Commander Vance, a tour he later described as the most important and most difficult education of his life, he returned to the instructor platform. But he was a different kind of teacher. He no longer roared. He spoke quietly, with a patience and wisdom that commanded more respect than his old voice ever had. He became one of the most sought-after instructors at the academy, known for his ability to see the hidden potential in every soldier, regardless of their appearance or demeanor. He often began his first lesson with a new class of trainees by telling them a story. "Let me tell you about a time," he would begin, his eyes looking off into the distance, "when I was the loudest, most confident, and most ignorant man in the room. Let me tell you about the day I met a ghost. Let me tell you what she taught me." He used his own story, his own profound failure, as his primary teaching tool. He taught his students to question their assumptions, to look past the surface, and to understand that the rank on a collar or the muscles on an arm are the least reliable indicators of a warrior's worth. He taught the lesson of Specialist Vance. The story, in the end, is not about the humbling of a single arrogant sergeant. It is a parable for a broader truth, a lesson that extends far beyond the confines of a military hangar. It is a reminder that in any organization, in any walk of life, there are quiet professionals, hidden masters, who possess a depth of competence and experience that is invisible to the loud and the proud. They do not seek the spotlight. They do not boast of their accomplishments. They are the foundation, the steel framework that holds everything up while others are busy putting on a show. Their argument is not made with words, but with action. Their authority is not demanded, but earned in the silent, relentless pursuit of excellence. The story of Commander Vance and Sergeant Deckard serves as an eternal caution. Do not judge by appearances, for you never know when the unassuming person standing quietly in the back of the room is, in fact, the one holding it all together. True strength is quiet. True competence needs no introduction. Let your actions be your only creed, and let the quality of your work be the only rank you ever truly claim.